habitat for humans in supposedly the national capital, which is supposedly a green garden city. So we have a long, long way to go in terms of institutionalising notions of how to live in Australia in Australian ways.
What's neo-Georgian?
Pardon?
What's neo-Georgian?
Oh, well, that's these... Georgian architecture was the way they built buildings in the time of King George, and that was this fashion where you have the narrow windows, the thick walls, the no eaves. Others could describe it much better than me, but it's fundamentally, it's a good architecture for a cold climate, certainly not for Australia, but it's fashionable. So the redesign, I've spent the best part of an hour talking about the need to redesign farming systems in Australia, and certainly in terms of the 768 million hectares of the continent, the farming systems apply to well over 500 million hectares of that. Nevertheless, the challenge in cities is completely analogous. The challenge in a home is completely analogous to the farm. Our cities have enormous ecological footprint. Urban lifestyles are equally unsustainable as those on many farms, but they have a bigger disconnect from resource condition. And it's not the fault of the poor, hapless unit owner in North Gungahlin, in one of these new appalling suburbs they're rolling out, that they have to have a car. It's not their fault that the services are hopeless, that it's not designed for them to get to the ANU without having to get a car or be extremely fit on a bike or whatever, or wait around a very long time for a bus. It's not the fault of people in those suburbs that they have to use drinking water to flush the toilet. That is appalling that we're still rolling out suburbs like that in 2008 in Australia, after 7 years of the worst drought in our European history. It is really easy if you dig a trench to put 3 pipes in it instead of 1 pipe in the trench. So yes, it's expensive and difficult to retrofit an old suburb where you've got to dig up the roads and all the old earthenware pipes are well down in the clay and so on. That's hugely expensive. It's not expensive to roll out a new suburb in a smart, green way. We did it for the Olympics in 1999. World's best practice, water-sensitive urban design. So we do it as a show-off exercise and then go back to business as usual 19th century approaches in 2008. It's outrageous. And the fact that the community isn't up in arms about it just shows how far we have to go in environmental literacy in Australia. People should be refusing to buy those houses because they know that the cost will ultimately come back to them, but they're not. So the market is dumb, the governments are dumb because the people are dumb around all this stuff. We are illiterate in terms of water, energy, biodiversity, living in the landscape within our environmental envelope. So at a technical level, there are so many parallels between rural and urban. So they are socially. Neil Barr has looked at income distribution between rural and urban Australians, and he's found that there is no statistical difference whatsoever in income distribution except below $10,000 a year in annual income, where there are more people in rural Australia earning less than $10,000 a year than there are in the cities, and above $100,000 a year, where there are more people in rural Australia earning above $100,000 a year than there are in the cities. So in the bush, there are more people at the rich end proportionally, and there are more people at the absolute abject poverty end proportionally than there are in the cities. But in the middle, where 90% of the people are, there's no significant difference whatsoever. Leah Bryant did a big study of rural women and urban women, a big comparative study, and she found no significant difference between the lifestyle aspirations, attitude to gender issues, a whole range of things. She couldn't split her sample across rural and urban. Certainly there's some differences in outcomes in terms of access to services and so on, but not in terms of where they want to be. And so a lot of this urban-rural divide, in my opinion, is a mental construct and an extremely unhelpful one. In both situations, there's a large gap between what we know we need to be doing and yet the availability of practical and profitable and easily adoptable solutions. There's a big need for new options, new technologies and systems. So what would a real Australian do? A couple of really basic design parameters. You'd only use drinking water for drinking. How many of us can say that? You'd live and work in buildings and towns and cities that are actually adapted to the country. And we have excellent examples and we showcase them, but they're so far from the norm that it's ridiculous. We'd use a lot more renewable energy. We'd be much more Australian in our fashions. I like poking fun at it, but unfortunately it's still look at backyard blitz. Look at Gardening Australia. Look at Burke's backyard, although that's gone now. So let's have our little Italianate alfresco courtyard with all hard surfaces and the latest introduced environmental weed from South Africa that grows from Cairns to Hobart without any TLC at all. And a true Australian would actually do something in the environment like we expect the farmers to do. So my final point is we have to completely rethink the notion of the environment. At the moment, it's seen as either a problem that we need to fix or spend taxpayers' money on. We're not seeing it as a repositioning opportunity for the Australian economy. Even Mick Kelty, the Australian Federal Police Commissioner, said recently that climate change is the world's biggest security issue by far. Completely dwarfs international terrorism as a security issue. Climate change is the world's biggest economic threat by far. And so we're going to be dealing with it for a long time. The economies that position themselves are going to do very, very well. Yep?
Well, we won't be able to make plastics without driving cars. Isn't that more of an immediate threat to
So here are some blokes putting a photovoltaic array on the top of my garage last week. And it was interesting to me that we still haven't got, if you look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, environment industries are still not seen as a category. You still can't find any statistics. Just today, I got on a new website to learn how to send large files, Richard, over the web. And I had to put my occupation. Environment is not there as a list among 30 occupations. So I was either agriculture or engineering. And so, but when you do try and unpack the stats to look at environment industries, it's growing incredibly fast. So these are 10-year-old figures, miles out of date. $500 billion global market growing at 7% per year. That's gone up now. That Australian market, 8.6 billion, even that was bigger than the total grains industry, 1% of GDP, or 1.3% of GDP, 1.6. But the interesting thing is the structure of the industry. Highly diverse, 58% of the services in, 2,000 firms, so lots and lots of little firms, but with large employment numbers and big export potential. In the Australian mining industry, we're already seeing that. Knowledge is the 4th biggest export of the Australian mining industry. It's bigger than lead or tin or zinc, and that's mainly from lots of little specialty firms, many of them environmental. So, you guys,